Welcome to Common Sense Unfiltered, where we talk common sense. Because as it turns out, it's not all that common.
I'm Katie Ratliff, Executive Director of Common Sense Institute, Arizona.
I'm Kelly Caulfield, Executive Director of Common Sense Institute, Colorado.
And I'm Cinnamon Watson, National CEO of Common Sense Institute.
Across the country, policymakers are making big decisions on complex issues that are often filtered through politics and partisanship. That's where CSI comes in.
We're nonpartisan, nonprofit, and focused on the facts. And each episode, we bring in the experts behind the research to break down complex issues and what they actually mean for your business, household, and family.
This is Common Sense Unfiltered, where common sense still exists, even when it's hard to find. Hello, and welcome to Common Sense Unfiltered, where we skip the spin and dive straight into the data. I'm Cinnamon Watson, CEO of Common Sense Institute, and today we're heading to the Hawkeye State, one of my favorite states in the whole country, and perhaps one of the most affordable states, too, I hear. CSI's Iowa chapter launched in 2023, and CSI Iowa has quickly become one of the most cited voices on the economy and jobs in the state of Iowa. Joining me today are Matt Everson, the brand new executive director for CSI Iowa, and Casey Thiesek, vice president of government affairs and legal counsel for the Iowa Bankers Association. Matt, Casey, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. This is great.
You're pretty new to the seat at CSI Iowa, but you're anything but new to the Hawkeye State and public policy there. Give our listeners a quick tour of what brought you here and why CSI.
Yeah, I've been in Iowa now 13 years. I'm originally a West Coaster, spent some time in DC, but if you look at the resume, I've always been around the economy, whether it was at Treasury Department or the broadcasters or NFIB. And, Cinnamon and I met probably a few months ago. I wasn't even expecting to meet you, but, I think we hit it off really well. And once I got to know CSI a lot better, it was just a natural fit. I love building things, and I knew CSI was doing great things in Iowa and maybe the general Midwest. But with your new leadership as the new CEO, and me coming on board, helping build this to what it really can be in Iowa and the Midwest really attracted me. And, helping folks like the Iowa bankers and our business communities as we try to reach through all the noise and all the distractions now in politics. I think CSI being a fact-based, independent, nonpartisan entity was really attractive to me, and I'm really glad to be on board and really excited for the future here.
That's great. Well, we're happy to have you. And for folks that haven't run into us and don't know much about CSI, give us your elevator pitch about what we're doing, why we're different from other think tanks, and why we're so important to the Iowa public policy landscape.
Yeah, I think what we do really well is obviously we're independent, we're nonpartisan, which is rare these days. And we have unbelievable people, economists, PhDs, researchers that are well respected, and I think what we can do, and Casey, knows this, he's been up there for a while, as well, is that cutting through this new populism noise and really getting in depth on really what's happening in the economy and what's not really happening in the economy, is more important than ever in deciding, what policies should stay, go, or not even be considered. And what we can kind of help do is put the facts and numbers to that to show what might or might not happen if certain things are implemented. And, we don't really advocate or lobby, but we put the facts out and then people can decide from there, use that information to help drive public opinion, legislative decisions. And so I think we're just one of the big new tools that you can use in public affairs or however you want to use it to, sort of cut through all this noise. And, we just did a recent study too with uh, some things that are very important to Casey's world. And, it kind of gave the other side of the coin to an issue that really was kind of one sided information wise. So I think that's where we are very powerful and different and can help. And, like I say, we're not a mouthpiece for any certain entity. We just let the numbers lie where they lie.
That's great. Well, in its third year, I have to say that CSI Iowa produced one of my all time favorite CSI studies in the 15-year history of the organization. And that was Clarkonomics. It was surprisingly popular, not just around Iowa, but around the country, and really kind of put us on the map and was a great way to dive into Iowa and introduce Ben Murray, our research director. Give us kind of the short version of what you expect to see in the future. What's on the
Yeah, I mean,
horizon, Iowa
Clark,
research?
Clarkonomics was kind of put us on the map. And, obviously, Caitlin Clark is, I would argue, one of the top 5 most popular athletes in the world. I don't think you can go anywhere where if you say you're from Iowa, her name is sort of associated with that, which is great for our state. And, obviously, she's done a lot for the University of Iowa, the state of Iowa, but women's basketball in general. So I think there's a lot of people that are proud. But yeah, that's kind of the things we want to do. We don't just want to do jobs reports and inflation, which are important, but we'll have some future fun reports as well. I think, there could be a sports report coming down the road here that we'll highlight in the fall, since we are a state that doesn't really have professional sports. So we rely on things like NASCAR, the Field of Dreams, that are really special to our state and how that drives tourism and the economy. And so you're going to see a lot of different things coming out of CSI Iowa. And like I said, maybe things in Nebraska, the Dakotas, and Indiana, as well as we sort of reach sort of the Midwest. And that's where Caitlin Clark is, Indiana. So, yeah, there's a lot of fun things that are coming down the road that aren't just boring, basic economics. This puts a little flavor to some of the stuff we're doing.
Economics is never boring.
It can be. It
Well,
depends who's presenting, but I will say we have one of the best, Ben Murray. I just listened to him earlier today present on workforce, which some people would probably find boring, but he did a really nice job in tying a few studies together. And if you have a good presenting economist, economics can be a lot of fun.
well, thank you for that, Matt. Casey, I want to get you looped back in here. You are the Vice President of Government Affairs and Legal Counsel for the Iowa Bankers Association. And I know you've been lobbying in Iowa for about a decade on bills like HSB 324, which CSI recently did an analysis on. Before we dig into that report, give listeners a quick tour of you and tell us a little bit about that bill.
Yeah, happy to. Well, again, thanks for having me on. I'm a transplant as well to the state of Iowa. I grew up in Illinois, went to Iowa State, so I'm still a Caitlin Clark fan, even though there's a bit of a rivalry there, but we can all appreciate greatness when we see it. So I won't hold that against her. But yeah, I went to Iowa State kind of on a whim coming out of high school, and then went to Drake for law school. And while I was at Drake University in Des Moines, I interned for a multi-client lobbyist, and I've been up at the Capitol ever since. Got hooked right away. And similar to Matt, I've had the opportunity to sort of be around um, various parts in different industries. I started with the Pharmacy Association, worked for Delta Dental of Iowa, and then ended up at the Bankers Association last fall. So I'm still relatively new, but HSB 324 was sort of one of the first, and the interchange issue was one of the first things that I had to dive into and understand. This is good timing doing this podcast, because there's been a lot of news on the interchange front just within the past 24 hours. So HSB 324, and there was a Senate companion bill as well. That bill didn't have a subcommittee, so that wasn't really the focus this year and in the past. But HSB 324 is very similar to legislation that was actually passed in Illinois. And what the bill does is, it's relatively short. It just says that the fee, the interchange fee, can't be applied to the tax portion of a transaction. Now, typically, the interchange fee is applied to the entire transaction because, well, you're paying for the payment rail of that entire cost. Illinois was sort of the first state to come up with this novel idea. The idea of doing something, I should maybe go back. The idea of doing something on it, reforming interchange, isn't necessarily new. This concept's been around for some time. And I think, today I would guess we'll probably talk a little bit about the Durbin Amendment and the application of that onto debit card fees. Um, but HSB 324, like that Illinois bill said, you can't apply this interchange fee on the tax portion and in Illinois on tips. So that gets real complicated right away, as you can imagine, in trying to sort that out. But on sort of the news front, while we're on it, the Northern District of Illinois on the Illinois bill recently came out with a new decision that says, in general, doesn't apply to national banks, federal savings associations, out-of-state banks that are covered under federal jurisdiction, which follows sort of an intervening regulatory action by the OCC to say that the Illinois law didn't apply to national banks. So there's been a lot of movement on this front, and the Illinois legislature actually late Sunday evening or early Monday morning, I guess you could call it, passed a 1-year delay on implementation of the law, which was set to go into effect to July 1st. And that's the second time they've done this. So I think that sort of illustrates how complicated even the legislature that passed this law understands this problem and how it is, and sort of the difficulties it presents in trying to bring this into fruition. So good timing to be talking about, that bill and the bill in Iowa, which is really substantially similar to that Illinois bill, with some differences like not including tips.
Well, to your point about it bubbling up in the news so much of late, I know this morning I was scrolling through my feeds and saw Steve Forbes wrote an article that was published, I think, just about 8 o'clock this morning, on the entire topic. And I think you can look at anyone's feeds and see evidence of that popping up or hearing an ad. Let's get into the substance of the report that CSI did. What would the impact be of HSB 324? Matt, you might have
Yeah, do you
a
want
good answer on that one.
Yeah, so in our report, right? I mean, there's all these talking points and probably misinformation on what it would actually do, right? It's supposed to save a bunch of money. And in my former life, I was a lobbyist for the small business, and it's supposed to help the small business owner. But, Casey's correct. I mean, it's like with any issue that's very complicated. I mean, can you imagine? It's almost like if you had minimum wage differences in every single city in Iowa. We have almost 1,000 cities. Could you imagine the paperwork, the complications that someone would have to do if, they're traveling, delivering into 10 different cities, all these things? And so it's the same thing sort of applies here, is that these systems are sophisticated and it's sort of one size fits all to make it work. And now if you start chipping away that Iowa has a different thing and Illinois has a different, Wisconsin, that, I mean, people are going to have to buy new equipment. People are going to have to do those things. So when, I think our study showed that yes, there would be some savings, 36 million, but the cost to, implement it, do it, would actually outweigh the savings. The small businesses would save maybe roughly $100 a year. Your typical small business, but the costs to transition to new systems and that would outweigh it. So maybe you wouldn't really receive the full savings until year 10. So it just doesn't make sense. I mean, obviously, I think we know that there are certain players that got this idea sort of ginned up, and it's our bigger retailers that will obviously, come out mostly on top. So I think what did our stats say? Like 65% of the savings come from 8.5% of the people that use it. So it really doesn't save small business. It probably won't save the consumer, according to our report. It's almost like a wash. And so that's what I'm saying is like all this, talk of oh, this is going to be great for consumers, small businesses, all these things. This is where we can come in and say, hey, let's look at it on the other side. There's two sides to every story. And our report sort of shows what you would expect, that there aren't really a lot of savings. In fact, it's probably more cash. And then, like worst case scenario, maybe banks aren't able to provide those services. I mean, you got to think of all the services, and Casey can kind of go into it, that banks provide. I mean, when you have your credit card and you swipe and it instantly knows you didn't really do it, fraud protection, all those things. There's a fee and a service to that. And like, if we complicate the system so much that, you know, people get out of business, right? I think the two biggest barriers to business is regulation and taxes. And, if we regulate these things, uh, through government enforcement, who's going to do it? Is there going to be an incentive for businesses to have all these services, that people sort of have come to expect when they get a credit card or uh, whatnot. And so, even for the business owner who is protected on these things. And so, um, yeah, I think our report sort of showed what I sort of would expect, that there's very few people that will benefit from this. And I think it could be much more harmful to the mass majority of folks if we start making these one-offs, and each state is different, and government comes in and regulates how a private business operates.
Do you see anything to add? And maybe you can shed some light onto who actually would benefit from the so-called savings.
Yeah. So, and just this is like we've kind of went over. If you haven't been paying attention, you're probably like, what is an interchange fee? And we've talked a little bit about that. But obviously, your bank issues a card. That fee covers your payment rail, right? The actual processing of the payment. It covers fraud loss or write-offs by the bank. So, I think we've all come to appreciate the fact that when you use your credit card and you have a fraudulent transaction show up, it's the bank that covers that. If it gets swiped at a large retailer, the retailer is not the one covering that fraud loss, which is a benefit for the consumer and the retailer. And so when I talked about HSB 324 at the subcommittee, I kind of highlighted, three things. And first was why is it beneficial for retailers? Well, there's ease and convenience, right? I mean, I think of the example now. I'm checking out at the store and you get directed to self checkout. A lot of times there's a sign on self checkout that says they don't accept cash. You have to use a card. Well, why is that? Because you can move faster. The retailer likes the ease and convenience of the card. And there's also costs associated with checks and cash. I think that kind of gets lost in this whole thing, that there's a cost associated with moving cash. And we've kind of moved to this society of we use our cards all the time. Well, that's because consumers want to use cards more too. I don't really carry cash anymore unless I know that I need it. I don't think I'm alone in that world. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to use cash either. That's why it gets lost in these debates as well, is that options still exist. Other payment options still exist, and no one's trying to change that. And so you've got consumers and retailers that like accepting plastic. And that's what has grown, I think, sort of proliferated these types of bills, is that it's not necessarily that the fee has gone up in the past 20 years. It's that people are using their cards more. And so when a small retailer gets sort of the readout of those fees at the end of the month, they see that increased cost. But that's because their consumers are using more plastic, um, but they don't necessarily see the costs associated with other forms of payment. And that's sort of the give and take that I highlighted at the subcommittee, along with the fact that there's some key things that this fee helps pay for. And one that I didn't mention yet was credit card rewards. Now, that's just one thing, but that's a consumer preference that people like. They like the ability to choose a card that has a rewards program. That's not every card, but that's a choice that people have. The interesting dynamic when you think about HSB 324 separate from the entire interchange discussion, is that so in Illinois, when this bill came up, it was sort of a late session deal. And Illinois had reimbursed retailers for collecting sales tax. But because of budgetary issues trying to make things work, they were looking at I think eliminating or scaling back that fee that went to retailers for collecting sales tax. And so in doing so, they kind of gave them this, hey, what if we can reduce the cost of the interchange fees in exchange for us collecting back some of this money on the sales tax? In Iowa, we've never reimbursed our retailers for sales tax. So when we look at this bill, it's kind of, I mean, I hate putting it, it's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. If we want to help retailers, let's not take from one legitimate fee source that helps pay for all of these things. Let's look at some creative options maybe to help our retailers. But this discussion, I think that kind of gets lost. This is really where this came up was just, hey, we're going to try to make you whole for something that we've been paying you for, and that's where this idea proliferated from.
Do you want to talk any further about some of the data?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on some of the big things, right? Like in our study, our average small business is, we kind of demoed that at $100,000 or less in revenue. And, the savings would be about $64 per year. If it was just straight up, if they didn't have to change their systems, if they didn't have to do any of those things. And it is funny, like, there is that talking point as Casey knows that, oh, this is going to be so great for small businesses. But usually when there's something regulated by the government on private entities, really the people that get hurt the most are small businesses and your general consumer. And so I think our study showed that. I think we've hit on the nose. Really, it's sort of these bigger retailers that would probably benefit most. And, uh, obviously, Casey hit it. It's kind of like regulating your way into more revenue through the government, which a lot of people do nowadays. And I would argue that is why Common Sense Institute is more important now than ever, as we can sort of be the, nonpartisan group that says, hey, wait, here are the actual numbers if you do this. And this isn't like a party line deal. I mean, you've got red states, blue states trying to
Yes.
do this on a whole host of things, not just, in our financial institution sector. I mean, you have it in insurance and you have it in other sectors where you've got groups trying to regulate or pinch down on a certain private industry. Uh, to make their margins a little bit better, and that's when it gets scary, and that's when things, get out of whack, and that's when it harms, the downstream, which is small businesses, and ultimately, right, who loses? The end user, which is the, consumer who may not have, small businesses go away or they don't have access to, certain things, and so I think our study, was very fascinating and sort of showed the other side through great data. And it was just Iowa. We didn't really compare Illinois or some of these other states like Colorado who are trying to implement these things. Hopefully we can, because I think it'll be helpful and it'll be very interesting in even bigger states, right? We're relatively a smaller state as far as GDP and those things. But it's just always that, and Casey would probably agree, is when you've got uh, private entities trying to regulate other private entities for their own gain. And I think our study sort of proves that out. I mean, you know,
I
67
think
million or $36 million in savings with the potential of 82.6 million in implementation costs. I mean, obviously do the math there, who's getting hurt. And, that just relates down the chain of jobs and businesses closing. And, when Iowa's economy is already sort of, stagnant, I don't think we can afford to, put that big of a burden on certain industries. But I don't think they know that, right, Casey? I mean, I don't think they realize it because they've been told even by
Well,
certain groups that
I
this
mean,
is
I
going to be
can
beneficial to them.
I can sympathize with small retailers for sure. I mean, costs add up and margins are thin. But unfortunately, this isn't the policy to help
Yeah.
find those gains. I think we know who's
yeah.
going to benefit from that. And I can also sympathize with consumers. We all understand that as well. And that, this is sort of broader discussion on the importance of having hard data to look at and understand when we look at a policy, it's not just in a vacuum. Yes, here's 36 million in potential savings for merchants, but where's the benefit for the consumer? And are those savings realized by small businesses? I mean, speaking for our community base, they want to support as much small business as they can. I mean, that's the lifeblood of why we're so fortunate in the state of Iowa to have such a well-banked, geographically widespread state when it comes to our banking industries, because we've got sort of vibrant small communities. We've got ag, we've got all these things, um, and that's who we want to help support and continue to support. But that's not what the data, or even the past, data shows on the Durbin Amendment as well. Who realizes these potential savings?
I will say that $82.6 million for implementation is staggering. There were some other numbers that were pretty eye catching as well. When we
Yeah, and I
ran
mean,
the
just
when we ran the
so
macroeconomic model, the numbers got bigger really fast. I think the year one output loss was $67 million, but even more important was the job loss of 350 jobs. I don't think we're at a point in our economy when anybody wants to see any job loss.
no, and especially in Iowa, right, where our workforce is pretty stagnant, except for mining and logging, apparently, according to our reports. I mean, we want to keep and hold on to as many jobs as possible, especially, right, as Casey knows, like we're sort of in a budget crunch, and like you need as many taxpayers as possible to help bridge that gap. And so I don't think we can afford uh, any job losses, let alone government mandated unintentional consequence job losses, which, that just seems to be the case lately here in Iowa. So I hope, and I think Casey knows, he was on some emails that I sent to the Indiana bankers and the Kansas bankers. I mean, hopefully people kind of, especially our people that are making the legislative decisions and policy decisions, see this other side that, hey, this isn't as, the grass is always greener. This isn't going to be some big savings to consumer and be the, silver bullet to our economic stagnation. In fact, it could be the opposite outcome. So,
Casey, how have your conversations with lawmakers and policymakers gone? Are they receptive to this sort of data? Is it compelling for them?
Yeah, yeah, I would say yes, actually. Especially looking at the results of, I don't know if results would be the right word, where this bill has gone and where these proposals have gone in Iowa. Certainly, there's consideration. And we had a subcommittee this year in the House, but um, so far that bill hasn't moved out of committee on either side. So I think there's been an understanding of, um, when we're fortunate we do have leaders in the state that say we're going to slow down when it comes to policy proposals that could have this outsized effect on our state economy, potential fracturing of a payment system that right now is uniform across the states. When you start talking about things like that, I think legislators start to slow down and say, well, maybe we need to have all the facts here, have all the data, understand what we're doing before we go forward with a proposal that could have drastic impacts across the state. So we've been fortunate in that aspect. We've also, highlighted that we've got a test case that's about to play out across the river here. Why would we run into uh, a proposal that's only been passed so far in one state now, Colorado? Um, we'll see what happens there with passage and then a potential signature. But we are fortunate in Iowa that we've got lawmakers that are fairly pragmatic. Well, when it comes to trying to understand um, what potential impacts can be on our state on unknowns. No one likes to run in and be the first for state policy, and we're fortunate that so far we've had receptive lawmakers that want to see how these things play out in other states, and we're pretty confident that we're on the right side of that argument.
Great. Well, one last question for each of you. Matt, first to you. If an Iowan is listening today, what's one thing they should take away from this report?
I think what they should take away is that that we are in some very interesting times legislatively. I think, you've seen a switch over the last decade that all the new ideas, whether bad or good, policy wise, are now coming out of the states. It used to sort of be like, everything comes out of DC and you do your normal things, but everything now, whether it's this or, you've got the poly market stuff, you've got
Right.
all these things that have there's been uniform. And we've even dealt with it, Casey and Iowa, right? Where different cities try to do their own laws, and we've had preemptive laws that make it standard across. I mentioned minimum wage and things like that. But I think what Iowans should take away is one, there's never been a time more important now than local state government because a lot of stuff is happening very quickly. Um, and number two, there's sort of this, and it's not exclusive to red or blue states. It's all over that regulating private industry has become a bigger and bigger factor. And at the end of the day, the biggest loser in that is the consumer, because they ultimately pay the price. The legislation, whether it's raising taxes or putting regulations on, which cost businesses either money or time, which is a cost, always filters down to the end consumer. And so, when luckily Iowa is the number one affordable state, but still in our report, the cost of living has risen in Iowa, just not as much as other states. And so the end consumer really loses out when these policies get implemented that really don't take into consideration the full picture. And so hopefully, like the Common Sense Institute with this issue and other issues we'll be uh, researching over the next several months and years, is that there's more there's more to the story. Always be aware, be very skeptical of where this original plan or policy is coming from. And I think that's what our uh, data indicates on this issue. So I'll let Casey answer
Casey's
too.
Yeah, Casey, same question. What's the big takeaway? What's the bumper sticker moment there?
Yeah, I think Matt kind of covered it at the end there. You gotta, and this is directly in the report looking at the Durbin Amendment. What did the Durbin Amendment do? Well, I can tell you what it didn't do. It didn't generate savings for consumers. That was the intent. And I think the Common Sense Institute report does a great job in highlighting that this proposal won't necessarily generate savings for consumers either. And when we look at what policies we should be advancing that benefit, our small businesses and those consumers, if we don't have data to back that up, we shouldn't be trying to advance something that we don't know what the impacts are long term.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. We've linked CSI's report, The Economic Impact of Restricting Interchange Fees in Iowa, in the podcast description. And we would encourage all of our listeners to visit our website at csinstituteia.org. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. So thank you both.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Casey. Cinnamon.